Tonight, we follow a quiet journey through one of the most beloved Western films ever made, The Outlaw Josey Wales. This is a gentle, peaceful telling of the story, meant to carry your mind gently through a world of wide-open prairies, slow rivers, dusty trails, and the kind of silence that only the American frontier can offer. But before that, my name's Murphy, and I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time of day it is for you. If this brings you calm, don't forget to subscribe. There are so many more peaceful nights ahead. Let your body grow comfortable and still, and allow this story to carry you gently forward, or perhaps far, far back. Our story begins in Missouri, sometime in the early 1860s. The land here is green and full and quiet. It stretches out in gentle rolling hills, broken up by patches of dark timber and long meadows, where the grass moves softly in the wind. It is a place that feels like it has always been here, and always will be. Like it was made for the kind of slow, steady life that asks nothing more of a man than honest work and a little patience. Josey Wales is the kind of man who fits perfectly into a place like this. He is a farmer, a simple, plain man who has built his world with his own 2 hands. He works the soil every day, tending his small piece of land the way a man tends something he truly loves. He knows every corner of his property, every slope of the fields, every tree along the fence line. He is not a man who talks a great deal. He is a man who does. His hands are rough from work, his face tanned and weathered from long days under the Missouri sun, and there is a kind of calm steadiness about him that makes him seem like he belongs to the earth as much as the earth belongs to him. He has a wife and a young son. Life on the farm is not glamorous. It is not easy, but it is good. There is the smell of morning fires and cooking food, the sound of a child running through dry leaves, the sight of smoke curling up from a chimney into a pale blue sky. The days pass one after another, full of small and quiet rhythms. The sound of an axe splitting wood, the low sounds of livestock, the gentle creak of a wagon wheel. These are the kinds of ordinary things that make up a life, and Josey Wales holds on to all of them, the way a man holds on to something precious, without quite knowing it yet. His son is still very young, small enough to ride on his father's shoulders through the fields at the end of a long day. Small enough that the world is still an endlessly surprising place, full of things to touch and examine and ask about. Josey is not a man who expresses affection in obvious or loud ways, but he has a patience with the boy that tells its own story, a willingness to slow down and look at whatever small thing has captured the child's attention, a steadiness in the face of the particular energy of a young boy who wants to be part of everything his father does. His wife keeps the household with the same kind of quiet capability that Josey brings to the fields. There is a partnership between them that does not need to announce itself. 2 people who understand each other's rhythms and requirements, who have built something together that is more than either of them would have built alone. The evenings are the best part of the day, when the work is done and the light is going amber, and the 3 of them are in the same space, doing the small things that fill the hours before sleep. A mended piece of harness, a story told to the boy. The comfortable silence of 2 people who have run out of the need to fill every moment with words. The farm is modest but cared for. The fields are ploughed in neat rows. The fences are mended. There is nothing about Josey Wales that speaks of ambition or restlessness. He is a man who wants exactly what he has: the land, the work, the quiet companionship of his family. The long evenings when the world settles and the stars come out above the Missouri hills. He has no great interest in the wider world, in politics, or in the talk of war that has been growing louder with every passing month. There are men in town who speak about secession and about the rights of states, about the Union and about the Confederacy, and these things are real enough to the men who argue them. But to Josey Wales, standing out in his field at the end of a long working day, watching the sun slip behind the tree line, the world of politics seems very far away. He is a farmer. He has his land, his family, and the long soft evenings of a Missouri summer. That is enough. For a little while, at least, it is enough. But the wider world has a way of arriving whether a man invites it or not. The war between the North and South had been spreading across the country like a slow fire, reaching into places that had hoped to stay out of it. Missouri was a particularly complicated place. It was a border state, pulled in two directions at once, full of men who had strong feelings on both sides. And with that tension came violence. Not always the organized violence of armies, but the rougher, more unpredictable kind. Armed groups rode through the countryside, burning farms, attacking families, settling old scores under the banner of one cause or another. One morning that violence comes to Josey Wales. A group of men on horseback arrive at his farm. They are not regular soldiers exactly, though they wear pieces of blue uniform and carry weapons. They are what people in Missouri call redlegs, a rough band of Union-aligned fighters known for their brutality and their willingness to visit suffering on the civilian families they consider enemies or sympathizers. Their leader is a man named Captain Terrell. He is hard-eyed and cold, the kind of man who has found purpose in cruelty and wrapped it in the language of righteous cause. They come without warning, as these things always do. Josey is working when they ride in. There is no negotiation, no real conversation worth having. These men have not come to talk. They have come to destroy. The farm, which Josey has spent years building with careful and patient work, is set on fire. The flames take hold quickly. The dry wood of the fences, the walls of the small house, the barn. Black smoke rises in thick columns into the morning sky, visible from miles away. The kind of smoke that every farmer in the region recognizes with a cold feeling in the stomach. And Josey's wife and young son are killed. The film does not linger on this moment with drawn-out suffering. It is quick and brutal and permanent, the way real loss often is. There is no time to prepare, no warning, no last conversation. They are simply gone, and the farm is burning. And Josey Wales is left in the smoke and the quiet that comes after terrible things. He survives, though he is badly hurt. He lies in the ruin of what had been his life, and somewhere in the long hours that follow, with the ash still warm and the smoke still rising, something inside him changes. The calm, steady farmer, who asked nothing of the world except to be left in peace to do his work, is still there, somewhere. But something new has settled into him too, something hard and cold and patient. Josey Wales has become a man with nothing left to lose and nothing left to protect, except the memory of what was taken from him. He picks himself up from the ground. He begins to practice with a revolver, spending long and quiet hours working his draw, learning the weight and balance of the weapon in his hand, getting to know it the way he once got to know the weight and balance of a farming tool. There is a quietness to this practice that is not peaceful, but not frantic either. It is methodical. It is the work of a man who has decided on a direction and is preparing himself for the road ahead, unhurried and deliberate, the same way he once prepared a field for planting. Word travels in the way that word always travels in troubled times, through shadows and whispers, from one pair of hands to the next. Josey Wales makes his way to the men who are fighting back against the Redlegs and the Union riders who have been tearing through Missouri. These men are Confederate guerrilla fighters, sometimes called bushwhackers, men who ride under irregular command and wage a kind of scattered, mobile war through the hills and back roads of Missouri and Kansas. The group Josey finds is led by a man called Bloody Bill Anderson, a fierce and driven figure who has earned his reputation honestly and terribly. His men are hard men, shaped by the same kinds of losses and grievances that have shaped Josey. Many of them have come to this life the same way, not out of political conviction exactly, but out of personal wounds that found a shape in the wider war. Josey fits in among them without ceremony. He doesn't talk much about why he's there. He doesn't need to. The men around him have their own reasons, and each man's reasons are his own. What matters is that he can ride, he can shoot, and he has the kind of steady nerve under pressure that makes a man valuable in the kind of fighting they do. He learns quickly. The guerrilla way of war is nothing like the organized march of regular armies. It is fast and sudden and unpredictable. Men melt into the trees and reappear miles away. They move at night, sleep in barns and thickets, know the country like the backs of their hands. It is exhausting and dangerous, and leaves little room for comfort or rest. But there is a kind of belonging to it, too. These men have formed something between them. Not exactly friendship, but a shared understanding that comes from living close together through hard days. Josey finds his place among them, quiet and capable, and over the months that follow, he becomes one of their most reliable fighters. The war in Missouri and along the border states is its own particular kind of conflict, different from the great pitched battles being fought further east. Out here, it is a war of ambush and reprisal, of small skirmishes and hard riding, of men who know every hollow and creek crossing in the territory. The rhythms of this kind of fighting are unlike anything organized armies experience. There are no fixed lines, no clear fronts, no formal encampments with flags and officers and mess halls. There is only the land and the people who know it, moving through it with speed and local knowledge, appearing where they are not expected, and disappearing before a response can be mounted. The advantage belongs entirely to the men who know the territory better than the men chasing them. Josey learns quickly which trees give the best cover at which time of day, which river crossings can be made quietly in darkness, which farms have owners who will give water without asking questions. He learns to read weather in the Missouri sky, to know when rain is coming, and how that will affect the roads and the soil and the visibility. He learns the language of horses under hard conditions. When a horse is at the edge of its endurance and needs rest, when it can push through another 10 miles, how to care for an animal in the field with limited resources. He also learns to read men. In this kind of fighting, where everything can change in an instant, and where survival depends on quick and accurate assessments, reading people becomes a survival skill. He gets good at it. The kind of patient and attentive reading that does not announce itself but is always happening, that notices the small signals that tell you whether a man is what he says he is or something else. Josey moves through all of it with the same quiet efficiency he brought to farming. He is not reckless. He is not loud about what he does. He simply does what needs doing, and then he is still again, waiting for the next thing. The years pass in this way. Seasons of movement and danger, occasional stretches of uneasy quiet, the constant awareness of being hunted while doing the hunting. Missouri in these years is a fractured, violent place, and Josey Wales becomes a part of its shadows. He becomes known, not celebrated exactly, not the way some men seem to crave, but known as a man who is steady in a fight, who doesn't break under pressure, who can be counted on. His reputation grows quietly, the way most real reputations do, through the direct experience of the men who have ridden alongside him. But even as the fighting continues, the larger war is moving toward an end. The great battles have been fought and decided. The Confederacy is losing ground on every front. The news arrives slowly out here in the Missouri hills, carried by riders and word of mouth, each report a little grimmer than the last. Men who have been fighting for years begin to feel the weight of the inevitable settling over them. By the spring of 1865, it is over. The Confederate armies have surrendered. The war that has torn the country apart for 4 long years has come to its quiet, exhausted end, not with any single dramatic moment, but with a gradual and spreading stillness as armies lay down their arms, and men began the slow, uncertain process of returning to whatever remained of their lives. The news reaches Josey's group out in the hills of Missouri like it reaches everywhere. Slowly, in pieces, confirmed by more pieces, until it becomes undeniable. The war is over. The cause for which these men have been riding and fighting is finished. For regular soldiers on both sides, the end of the war meant going home. For the guerrilla fighters of Missouri, men who had never been part of formal armies, men whose names were known to federal authorities, men who had been conducting a kind of warfare that existed in a legal and moral gray zone. The question of what came next was a great deal more complicated. A man named Fletcher, who has been the commander of the group, receives word of an offer. The Union is extending a kind of amnesty, a pardon, a chance to lay down weapons, sign an oath of loyalty, and walk away. For the men who had been riding as guerrillas, this offer was not without its complications. It required surrendering, presenting themselves to Union authorities, trusting in the promise of peace from men who had, not long ago, been enemies. Fletcher is a practical man. He looks at the situation with clear eyes and concludes that the fighting is done, that the offer is genuine enough to be worth taking, and that continuing to ride would only bring more suffering without any achievable end. He brings the offer to his men. Most of the men are willing to consider it. The war is over. They are tired. Some of them have families somewhere. The idea of a pardon, of being able to walk back into the daylight world without being hunted, has a powerful appeal to men who have been living in the shadows. They gather to hear what Fletcher has arranged. There are perhaps 20 men, maybe a few more, sitting or standing in a loose group, their horses nearby, their faces carrying the particular weariness of men who have been moving and fighting for too long. Fletcher speaks to them about the offer, about the terms, about the assurances he has received. It is, he says, the only sensible path forward. Josey Wales listens to all of this from the edge of the group. He does not speak much during the discussion. He sits a little apart, the way he often does, watching and thinking with that quiet, interior way of his. He listens to what Fletcher says, and he hears the words clearly enough. Pardon, amnesty, peace, going home. He hears all of it, but he cannot bring himself to take that step. For Josey, the men who killed his wife and son are still out there. Captain Terrell, who led the raid on his farm, is still alive, still wearing a federal uniform, still representing everything that destroyed what Josey had built. Signing an oath, accepting a pardon, laying down his weapons and shaking hands with the men on the other side. This is something that Josey cannot square with the memory of that burning farm, and those two people who were his whole life. It is not stubbornness exactly, or not only stubbornness. It is something deeper, something that has to do with who he is and what he carries. He tells Fletcher, in his quiet way, that he will not be surrendering. Fletcher understands what Josey is, even if he wishes things were different. There is a real respect between these two men, the kind of respect that develops between people who have lived hard days side by side. Fletcher does not argue with him. He knows it would do no good. Josey rides away from the group and watches from a distance as the others prepare to make their surrender. He watches them ride toward the Union camp, and something in him registers the wrongness of it, even before anything has happened. A kind of instinct, built from years of living in dangerous territory, tells him to stay watchful. What happens next is not a surrender, it is a massacre. The men who walk toward the Union troops in good faith, trusting in the promise of amnesty, are cut down. The Union soldiers open fire on the surrendered men, and in the chaos and the smoke, and the sudden, terrible noise of it, the men who had been ready to lay down their arms and go home are killed. It is a betrayal of the worst kind, the kind that uses a man's trust as the weapon against him. Josey watches from his position at a distance, close enough to understand what is happening, close enough to feel it in his chest like a physical blow. The men he has ridden with, who he has trusted with his life for years, are being killed in a field while trying to surrender. He does not turn away. He watches it all. And then, because Josey Wales is who he is, he does not run. He rides in. He charges towards the Union soldiers with a rage that is not loud or wild, but cold and absolutely certain, firing as he goes, moving through the smoke and confusion with a purpose that has nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the simple, terrible fact that he cannot stand by and do nothing. He does not save them. There are too many soldiers and too little time, and the killing has already been done. But he moves through the middle of it all the same, fighting his way through with a ferocity that shocks even the soldiers firing at him, and somehow, improbably, impossibly, he comes through the other side, alive. He escapes into the Missouri countryside, wounded and riding hard, leaving behind the field where the men he rode with have been killed. The Union soldiers know what they have done, and they know that Josey Wales got away. There is a practical concern among them now, not just a legal one, but a real one. Josey Wales has seen what happened in that field. He knows it was a betrayal. He is alive, and he is dangerous, and he is out there somewhere in the vast and complicated landscape of the post-war border country. Captain Terrell, who was present, understands the particular problem that Josey Wales represents. Terrell is a man who has prospered under the cover of war, and the end of the war has not changed his nature. He has powerful friends, connections that allow him to operate in the space between official orders and personal ambition. He sets in motion the machinery that will pursue Josey Wales, not just as a fugitive from the law, but as a personal project. Josey rides deeper into the countryside. He is hurt and alone and carrying the weight of everything that has happened. But he is alive, and the thing inside him that keeps him moving, that hard, cold, patient engine, is still running. It has been running since the morning he woke up in the ashes of his farm. He is not finished. Word travels fast in the world of official documents and formal declarations. Josey Wales, who had simply been a farmer and then a guerrilla fighter and then a survivor, is now something else in the eyes of the United States government. He is an outlaw. His name is written on papers. There is a bounty posted for him, a sum of money offered to whoever can bring him in. dead or alive, the way bounties are always written. The declaration has a formal, bureaucratic coldness to it, the kind that comes from people who were not in that field when the surrendered men were shot down. Josey Wales is a wanted man, a fugitive, a criminal in the eyes of the law, and the law has set its machinery into motion. This is how the world works sometimes. A man who has done nothing but try to protect what was his, who refused to surrender because he had personal reasons too real and too painful to simply set aside, is now defined by his refusal, made into a thing to be hunted and brought back or destroyed. The irony of this is not lost on Josey, but irony does not change the situation. He rides south and west, away from Missouri, away from the familiar territory he has known for years. The land opens up before him. The wide, rolling landscape of the southern plains, the long grasses and limestone outcroppings of the frontier. Country that gets bigger and emptier with every mile. The sky here is enormous, wider than anything Josey knew back in Missouri, pressing down on the world with its pale blue weight. In the early days of riding, before the company of others, there is a particular quality to the solitude. The frontier, for all its danger, has a kind of austere beauty that is impossible to ignore, even for a man carrying as much grief as Josey Wales. The wildflowers in the tall grass, the hawks circling on the warm afternoon air, the enormous purple-edged thunderstorms that build in the west and roll in across the prairie with an unhurried majesty. All of it is there, whether Josey wants to notice it or not. And sometimes, despite himself, he notices. He makes camps that are as comfortable as they need to be, and no more. He knows how to live out of a saddlebag. What to keep, what is necessary, what is worth carrying, and what slows a man down. He builds fires only when the cold demands it, and the cover of trees or rock makes the light invisible from a distance. He drinks from creeks that run clear and cold over smooth stones. He eats simply and without fuss. He sleeps lightly, in the way of men who have learned that the world can change quickly. But he sleeps. He moves carefully, keeping to the back roads and the open country, avoiding towns when he can. He knows his face is becoming known. He knows men will be looking for him. He is a careful man by nature, and this carefulness keeps him moving through the days without being caught. The bounty on Josey's head means that there are now men who will make it their business to find him. Bounty hunters are a particular kind of frontier professional. Men who live in the margins of the law, using its rewards while not always being restrained by its rules. Some of them are genuine trackers, men with real skills who know how to follow a trail across difficult country. Others are opportunists who have heard there is money to be made and have headed in a general direction, hoping luck will do what skill cannot. They begin appearing in his path. Josey is not surprised by this. He has expected it. A man with a price on his head in the frontier west is a magnet for certain kinds of attention, and Josey has had enough hard experience to recognize the signs. A rider in the wrong place, asking the wrong kind of questions at a trading post. A pair of men who seem to be matching his route a little too precisely. The quiet tension that settles over a small settlement when someone asks about a stranger who passed through. He continues moving south and west, pressing deeper into the great open country that lies between Missouri and Texas. The landscape changes gradually as he travels. The green hills and dense timber of Missouri giving way to a more open, golden world of grasslands and wide skies. Rock formations, rising from the plains, like the ruins of ancient things, rivers that run cold and clear through cottonwood-lined banks. He rides as much at night as during the day when he can, making use of the darkness and the silence of the open country to put distance between himself and whoever might be following. The frontier nights are very quiet out here, broken only by wind in the grass and the sounds of night birds and the occasional distant howl of something moving through the dark. The first serious group of bounty hunters catches up to him at a river crossing, one of those wide, shallow places where the water runs over smooth stones and the banks are open on both sides. It is the kind of confrontation that the frontier produces with a certain weary regularity. Men who have decided that someone else's life is worth less than the money printed on a wanted notice, riding up with the confident assumption that Josey Wales will be surprised or outmatched or simply unlucky. They are wrong. Josey is none of those things. He is a man who has spent years in situations more dangerous than this, in the middle of firefights involving dozens of men, and he has developed a particular kind of unruffled clarity in moments of danger that makes him extraordinarily effective. He sees the men coming, he understands the situation immediately, and he moves through it the way a man moves through familiar work, not frantically, not desperately, but with that same quiet certainty he brings to everything else. The fight is brief and decisive. When it is over, Josey Wales is still standing, and the bounty hunters are not. He does not celebrate this. He does not seem particularly affected by it either, beyond the practical relief of a threat that has been resolved. He checks his weapons, sees to his horse, and continues riding. This is what Josey Wales has become. Not a man who seeks violence, but a man who has learned that it will find him, and has made himself ready to meet it. A little further along his journey, Josey comes across a man who changes the shape of what's ahead. The man's name is Lone Warty, and he is old. A Cherokee man with a deeply lined face and dark, thoughtful eyes that hold a kind of patient humor. He is dressed in a mix of things, some of which could be called traditional, and some of which simply reflect a life lived on the margins of two worlds, picking up what is available and useful, and letting the rest go. He has a battered hat and a quiet, unhurried way about him that would make a less perceptive person underestimate him. Lone Warty is a man of significant and complicated history. His people, the Cherokee, were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands in the southeast and relocated to what was called Indian Territory, a journey known as the Trail of Tears that cost thousands of lives and left the Cherokee Nation diminished and displaced, resettled in land that was given in treaty, and then, as always seemed to happen, reduced and threatened again by subsequent agreements and the restless expansion of the country, pressing in from every direction. Lone Warty has lived through the particular grief of a people who have had almost everything taken from them and have had to find ways to keep going anyway. During the Civil War, the Cherokee Nation itself was divided. Some fighting for the Confederacy, some for the Union, some trying to stay out of a conflict that was, in many ways, not their fight, but whose consequences would fall on them regardless of what they chose. Lone Warty fought and survived and emerged from it on the wrong side of the official settlement, which for a Cherokee man in Indian Territory in the 1860s was a position of considerable precariousness. He carries none of this as a visible burden. What he carries instead is a kind of philosophical equanimity that has been hard-won through long experience of the world, treating him and his people with consistent disregard. He has found, somewhere in all of that, a way to hold the injustice of things while still being present in the moment, still noticing what is good and funny and worth appreciating, still finding ways to keep going that do not require pretending the bad things didn't happen. Josey finds Lone Warty in a way that might suggest the old man found him first. There is something about Lone Warty that suggests he often knows more about the situation than he appears to. He has survived a long time in a world that has not been particularly kind to his people, and survival in those circumstances requires a particular kind of intelligence. Social, observational, steady. Lone Warty is also a man with a certain dry, quiet wit that emerges unexpectedly in small observations that carry more weight than they appear to. He makes a remark about trying to sneak up on Josey. He mentions, with perfect calm, that he tried and failed, which in itself is a kind of compliment between men who understand such things. He has his own history with the government, and with the broken promises that come from it. He knows what it is to be on the wrong side of official declarations and to live with the consequences. He mentions something that stays with Josey, that he tries to sneak up on people to keep sharp, since being sneaky is how he has stayed alive this long. He delivers this with an absolutely straight face, and there is something very funny about it, and something very sad, and something very true. Josey listens to this old man with the kind of attention he rarely gives, and something in the exchange. In the dry humor and the shared experience of being people the world has decided are expendable, creates the beginning of a connection between them. Lone Warty decides to ride along. This is not presented as a dramatic decision. It is quiet and practical, and entirely in keeping with the character of both men. Josey does not make a great fuss about accepting company. Lone Warty does not ask for permission exactly. It simply becomes a fact. There are now two of them. This is how the group around Josey Wales begins to form. Not through grand gestures or formal alliances, but through the simple accumulation of people who find themselves traveling in the same direction for their own reasons, and who discover, somewhere along the way, that there is a kind of safety and warmth in company that makes the journey easier. Lone Warty is good company in the particular way that quiet, intelligent people are good company. He talks when he has something to say, and he is silent when he doesn't. And Josey respects this rhythm because it matches his own. They ride together through the open country, two men on horses against a wide and quiet landscape, and the days pass with a gentle, unhurried rhythm. Lone Warty offers something that Josey does not always have: perspective. He has seen a great deal in his long life. He has seen what happens to people who let anger carry them too far past the point where it is useful. He does not lecture Josey about this. He simply exists alongside him as a man who has come through his own version of grief and dispossession and emerged on the other side still intact, still capable of finding moments of pleasure in a good morning or a well-told story. This presence, quiet as it is not nothing. Not long into their journey together, Josey and Lone Warty come across a situation that requires Josey's particular kind of help. There is a young woman named Laura Lee traveling with her grandmother, a practical and sharp-tongued older woman who goes by Grandma Sarah. They are Kansas settlers, a grandmother and granddaughter pair, headed to Texas, where the old woman's son has apparently established something of a homestead. They are decent, ordinary people trying to make their way in difficult country, and they have fallen into some trouble along the road. Laura Lee is young and somewhat sheltered, in the way that people who grow up in organized, settled communities tend to be sheltered from the harsher realities of frontier life. She is not helpless, but she has not had occasion to develop the particular skills of self-preservation that the open territory demands. She is also, in the way of such stories, a person whose presence changes the emotional temperature of the group she joins. Josey's manner toward Laura Lee is gruff and restrained in the way that men who are not accustomed to company often are. He does not know quite what to do with her presence, and so he does what he does with most things. He acts practically and keeps his feelings, whatever they might be, somewhere below the surface where they cannot complicate the immediate business of staying alive. But he helps. He does what is needed, in that quiet and efficient way of his, and the grandmother and Laura Lee are drawn along in the wake of Josey's forward movement. Grandma Sarah is a remarkable character in her own right. She is tough in the bone-deep, unsentimental way of women who have built lives in hard country, and she has an opinion about nearly everything, and no hesitation about expressing it. She is not frightened of Josey Wales, which is itself a kind of statement. She takes him in and assesses him with sharp eyes, and decides that whatever his official status might be, he is a decent enough man for her purposes, and that is enough. So the company continues to grow, one person at a time, each edition its own small story. There is a dog that turns up somewhere along the way, a scrappy, friendly animal who simply appears and decides to join, the way dogs sometimes do, as if they have been waiting for exactly this particular group of people to come along. The dog adds a kind of warm, uncomplicated affection to the group that nothing else quite can. It has no agenda, no past, no complicated reasons for being there. It simply is, cheerfully and completely. There is also a young man named Jamie, who had been with the gorillas earlier in the story, and who ends up riding with Josey. He is young, genuinely young, the way soldiers who start too early are young, not fully formed yet, still carrying the openness and vulnerability that life on the run tends to burn out of people if they're not careful. Josey develops a protective feeling toward Jamie that he doesn't entirely acknowledge, in the way that a man who has lost a son sometimes handles things that remind him of what he lost. The group moves south through changing country, the vast prairies of the borderlands, rivers running shallow over gravel beds, nights under enormous skies where the stars come out so thick and close that they seem like a second world pressed against the first. They travel at a pace set by the slowest member, which means they travel slowly, and this slowness has a quality to it that is not frustrating, but restful, the sense of movement that is not rushed, of progress that happens in its own time. They share meals around campfires. They sleep under the stars. They have the kinds of conversations that happen naturally when people are moving through open country together. Unhurried, often oblique, touching on things that matter without necessarily addressing them directly. Lone Warty tells stories. Grandma Sarah makes observations about everything. Josey stays quiet most of the time and listens. The campfire meals are simple and often repetitive. Whatever they have managed to carry or acquire, cooked over the fire in the basic ways that the frontier requires. But there is something about eating together in the open air, with the immense sky overhead and the fire making its warm circle against the dark, that makes even plain food taste like something more than it is. The warmth of the fire, the company of familiar faces, the knowledge that the day's riding is done and the night will be relatively safe. These things together create a kind of contentment that has nothing to do with luxury. Some evenings, Lone Warty tells stories in the way of his people, stories that are about something specific on the surface and about something much larger underneath. He tells them without explanation or moralizing, letting the story do its own work, which is the way the best stories are always told. Grandma Sarah listens to these with a sharp attention she doesn't fully acknowledge, because admitting she finds value in them would complicate her carefully maintained air of practical skepticism. There are also silences that become comfortable, the particular silence of people who have been through enough together that they do not need to fill every moment with noise. The sound of the fire, the sound of the horses nearby, the wind moving through the grass. These are peaceful things, and the peace they offer is real. There is something forming in this group that none of them quite name. Something that has to do with belonging, and with the particular warmth that comes from being surrounded by people who have chosen, in their own ways, to be in your company. The landscape they are moving through is not empty. The Great Plains and the territories of the Southwest are occupied by native peoples whose relationship to this land goes back thousands of years, and whose response to the flood of settlers moving through their territory varies from accommodation to resistance to outright war, depending on the circumstances and the tribe and the particular history of each encounter. One of the most significant groups in the territory Josey's group is crossing are the Comanche. They are extraordinary horsemen and fierce defenders of their territory, and they have been in conflict with both white settlers and with the Mexican government south of the border for generations. The particular band they belong to is led by a chief named 10 Bears, a man whose reputation is well known and whose authority over his people is complete. Josey and his group become aware of Comanche presence in the territory they are traveling through. There are signs, the kinds of signs that experienced people read in the landscape without needing to be told. The feeling of being watched, movement at the edges of vision, the particular silence that falls over the open plains when something significant is close. The Comanche are watching them. Josey knows it, and he rides with the awareness of it, neither pretending it isn't happening, nor turning back. There is a moment of genuine danger, not a battle exactly, but the kind of encounter that could very easily become one, where the outcome hangs in the balance between the actions of a few people and the state of relations between cultures that have every reason not to trust each other. Josey makes a decision that reveals something essential about who he is. Rather than trying to fight or flee, he rides out to meet the Comanche leader, 10 Bears, directly. This is an act of courage that is also an act of respect. The kind of respect that says, I know who you are, I know this is your territory, and I am here to talk to you as one person to another, rather than as an enemy or a threat. 10 Bears is a figure of real authority and real stature. He is not a man who is impressed easily, and he has seen enough of what white men say and what white men actually do to have a well-founded skepticism about declarations of peace and good intent. He listens to what Josey has to say with the expression of a man who is weighing every word carefully. Josey speaks honestly. He does not have a speech prepared, because he is not a man who prepares speeches. He says what is true, that he is a man who has been at war, that the war is over for him, that he is not looking for conflict, but for a place to live in peace, and that he knows the difference between a man who talks about peace and a man who actually means it, because he has seen what happens when those two kinds of men are confused for each other. He says something else, something that cuts to the heart of it. He says that he reckons they are all pretty much alike men who have been lied to by governments, who have had things taken from them, who have had to make hard choices in a world that wasn't fair. This observation, made quietly and without any sense of manipulation, finds its way through 10 Bears' careful guard. 10 Bears responds with the gravity of a man who has been carrying the weight of his nation on his shoulders for a long time. He speaks of the things that have been promised to his people and broken, He speaks of the land that was theirs, and the way it has been reduced and threatened by the same forces that have been reducing and threatening everything else. He speaks with the weariness of someone who has been through this kind of conversation before, and found it to produce, generally, nothing of lasting value. But something in Josey Wales is different. 10 Bears can sense it. The absence of performance. The quality of a man who says what he means without decoration or strategy. They reach an agreement. It is not a treaty with papers and signatures and official seals. It is simply 2 men looking at each other and deciding that peace between them is possible and worth attempting. They smoke together. This is not a small thing in the context of what it represents. A warrior of 10 bears standing, choosing to smoke with this strange, weathered white man who rode out to meet him alone. It means something. Josey rides back to his group with the kind of quietly satisfied expression of a man who has done something difficult and important and is glad it went the way it did. The threat has not disappeared. The broader tensions between the Comanche and the settlers are real and will not be resolved by one conversation between 2 people. But for this group, in this particular piece of territory, something has shifted. They are safer than they were. They have an understanding that, while it cannot be guaranteed, is at least genuine. Along the way, Josey encounters another person who needs help. She is a Navajo woman known as Little Moonlight, and she has been in the hands of bounty hunters. Men who have been using her as a captive in the way that the ugliest parts of frontier life sometimes treated people as objects rather than persons. She is quiet and watchful when Josey first encounters her, the kind of person who has learned to make herself small and unobtrusive as a survival strategy. Josey helps her with the same lack of ceremony he brings to most things. He does not make a production of it. He does not seek thanks. He simply removes the problem that has been placed on her, and after that, she is free to go or to stay, as she chooses. She chooses to stay. Little Moonlight becomes part of the group in her own quiet way, moving with them through the landscape with a composure and awareness that has been earned through difficult experience. She communicates sometimes through lone Wati, who has enough shared language to bridge some of the gap, and sometimes through the simple fact of presence and action, which needs no translation at all. She and lone Wati develop their own understanding. 2 people from nations that have been pushed and diminished and relocated by the same forces that have made Josey Wales an outlaw, finding something in each other's company that is familiar without needing to be explained. The group continues growing in its quiet, organic way, each new addition making the whole something more than the sum of its parts. The journey south and west takes them through country that is genuinely difficult and genuinely beautiful in equal measure. The Great Plains give way to more dramatic terrain. Red rock canyons, dry creek beds that flash into rivers after a rain, cedar and juniper-covered hills that smell sharp and clean in the morning air. The sky is enormous and constantly changing, full of the kind of weather that the open plains produce without warning. They ford rivers, they camp in the shelter of rock formations, they move through days that are very hot and nights that are surprisingly cold, under skies that are purple-black and thick with the stars. The rhythm of travel on horseback, steady and deliberate, has a quality that is almost meditative. The movement of hooves on hard ground, the creak of saddles, the sound of wind in the grass. There are moments of hazard that Josey handles with his usual calm efficiency, and moments of unexpected peace that Grandma Sarah appreciates out loud in her brisk, no-nonsense way. She has an admirable tendency to find the good in difficult circumstances, not through willful positivity, but through the practical wisdom of a woman who has learned that complaining about the landscape serves no purpose. Josey begins to talk about a destination, a place in Texas where they might be able to settle, a ranch where a man named Carpetbagger has land. It is something he has been moving toward without quite declaring it, a destination that has been forming in his mind during the long riding days, a possibility that has emerged from the simple fact of having these people alongside him. He is not a man who talks about hope, but he is moving toward something, and the direction has changed from pure flight to something more like purpose. Texas spreads out before them in all its contradictory largeness, grand and empty and full of possibility, but also full of the particular kind of danger that comes to places where formal authority has not yet fully taken hold, and where various groups of men with weapons and grievances are still working out who belongs where. They come across a small Texas settlement, a modest collection of buildings and honest hopes, a place where people have come to try to build something permanent out of the unsettled country. The settlers here are a mixed group, and they are in trouble. The ranch that will eventually become their home is a place called the Crooked River Ranch, sitting out in the open Texas landscape, with nothing but sky and grassland in every direction. There are structures there, but they have been neglected or damaged, and need the kind of patient work that turns a ruin back into a habitation. There is a well. There are corrals with broken fencing. There is a house that is solid in its bones, but emptied of everything that would make it a home. Josey looks at this place with a farmer's eye. Not romantic, not sentimental, but practical and assessing. He sees the well and the soil and the space for a kitchen garden and the natural shelter of the landscape. He sees the work it would take. He has never been afraid of work. The people with him look at the same landscape and see the same work, and they have the same response. This can be made into something. They begin quietly and without ceremony to do that. Fences are mended. The house is cleaned and organized. Grandma Sarah takes possession of the kitchen area with a proprietary authority that no one disputes. Lone Warty finds a comfortable spot in the shade, and from there offers observations about the progress being made, some of which are useful and some of which are simply funny, and both kinds are welcome. There are also Comancheros, rough outlaws and mercenaries who operate in the border territory between Texas and Mexico, preying on settlers and travelers and anyone else who seems to offer an opportunity. They have been menacing this small settlement, extracting what they want through threats and violence, and the settlers do not have the means to defend themselves effectively. The settlement is led by a man who is doing his best in difficult circumstances, trying to hold his community together under pressure. There is a tired courage about these people, the kind that comes not from being unafraid, but from deciding that what they are building is worth protecting, even when it costs something. When Josey and his group arrive, there is a moment of assessment on both sides. Josey is not a trusting man by long habit, and the settlers are not entirely sure what to make of this quiet, weathered stranger and the odd collection of people traveling with him. But the situation speaks for itself. These are people who need help, and Josey Wales, though he would never put it in these terms, is a man who cannot keep riding past people who need help. The outlaws who have been troubling the settlement do not yet know about Josey Wales. They arrive in their usual way. A group of hard, threatening men, confident in their weapons and their numbers and the fear they have already established in this place. They move with the casual arrogance of bullies who have not yet met anyone willing to push back. And then they meet Josey Wales. The confrontation has a quiet tension to it before it becomes anything else. the kind of moment where the air changes and everyone in it can feel the change, even if they couldn't explain exactly why. Josey does not make speeches. He does not threaten or bluster. He simply stands where he stands, and something in the way he stands, the way he looks at the men in front of him, communicates that this is a fundamentally different situation from what they were expecting. There is a famous quality to the scene. A Texas bush boss and his group of dangerous men arriving to collect what they believe they are owed, only to find a man who is entirely unimpressed by them and perfectly willing to demonstrate why. Josey's reputation has been growing as he has traveled, and it has a way of arriving before him in the way that real reputations do. The confrontation resolves in Josey's favor, as such confrontations tend to do when one of the parties is Josey Wales. He is not damaged by it. The settlers are not further harmed. The problem that has been hanging over this small community is removed. The settlers begin to understand what they have in their midst. As the group settles more deeply into the territory around the Texas settlement, Josey has additional encounters with the various men who are searching for him. Bounty hunters, soldiers, opportunists drawn by the reward money that is still out there with his name attached to it. There is a particular scene at a trading post, one of those rough, essential frontier establishments that serve as supply depot and social hub and neutral ground all at once. Trading posts in this part of Texas are places where all kinds of people come and go, and the proprietors maintain a careful neutrality. Not because they don't have opinions, but because taking sides is bad for business and potentially dangerous. Josey arrives at the trading post to get supplies. The practical, ordinary necessities of life on the move. Flour, coffee, ammunition, the basic things. He moves through it with a calm that is, by this point, almost entirely genuine. He has been dealing with threats for long enough that the baseline of danger has become simply the texture of his life, something he moves through rather than around. There are men there who recognize him, or who think they might, or who are watching for exactly the kind of man Josey appears to be. The tension builds in that particular way of frontier confrontations, through small signals and loaded silences, and the careful positioning of people in a room. When it breaks, Josey handles it with the same economy of motion that defines him. Not excessive, not theatrical, but completely effective. Afterward, the room settles back into its usual quiet, the way water settles after a stone is dropped in, and Josey concludes his business and leaves. The people of the small Texas settlement have been watching Josey Wales. They have seen how he handles threats. They have seen how he is with the people in his own group. Gruff and spare with words, not demonstrative, not warm in any obvious way, but present in a way that means something. He is always where he needs to be. He does not have to be asked twice. He is honest in the direct, uncomplicated way of a man who has never seen the point of being otherwise. A slow respect forms, not the kind of admiration that gets loud and showy, but the quieter, more durable kind. The kind that comes from watching someone simply be who they are, consistently, over a period of time. The settlers begin to feel something they have not felt in a while, that this might be a place that can hold against the pressures bearing down on it, that there might be a future here. Word about Josey Wales and who he is filters through the settlement. Most of them are practical people who know that the world is full of complications, and that labels applied by the government in Washington do not always perfectly describe the moral reality of what a person is. They have come out to this frontier partly because they want to be far enough from that apparatus to make their own judgments about their own neighbors. They have made their judgment about Josey Wales. It is a good one. Something is changing in Josey Wales that he does not entirely acknowledge, but which the people around him can see. He has been carrying, since the day his farm burned, a fundamental aloneness. Not just physical aloneness, though there was plenty of that, but something more essential, a withdrawal from investment in things that could be taken away. A decision made somewhere below the level of conscious thought that the safest thing was to hold the world at arm's length so that the world could not hurt him the way it had hurt him before. But these people he is traveling with, Lone Warty and Grandma Sarah and Laura Lee and Little Moonlight and the young Jamie and the dog, they have gotten through somehow. Through the cracks in the armor, through the gaps that open up when you spend enough days riding beside someone through enough kinds of weather. He is not demonstrative about this. It does not announce itself in his behavior in any dramatic way. But it is visible in small things, in the way he checks on Jamie with a concern that goes beyond practical necessity, in the way he speaks to Grandma Sarah with something that approaches gentleness, in the way he looks at the group sometimes with an expression that is not quite the face of a man who is running alone. He has become, without quite deciding to, the center of something. These people orbit around him not because he demands it, but because he is, in some fundamental way, what they need. Someone steady and capable and present. Someone who will handle the thing that needs handling. Someone who is not going anywhere. And they have become something for him, too. Something that he has not had since Missouri. Through all the weeks and months of riding and traveling and building this unlikely family, one thing has remained constant. Captain Terrell is still out there. Terrell has not given up. He is the kind of man who does not give up, partly because of pride, and partly because the matter is personal, in a way that goes beyond official duty. Josey Wales is the witness to what happened in that Missouri field. He is the man who survived what shouldn't have been survived. He is the living reminder of the betrayal that Terrell orchestrated, the single thread that, if pulled, could unravel things that Terrell would prefer to remain woven tight. Terrell moves through Texas with a group of soldiers and, at various times, other kinds of hired help. Men who know the territory, men who can track. He has resources. He has the backing of official authority. He has Senator Lane, the political force behind the operation, who has invested enough in the pursuit of Josey Wales that walking away from it now would be its own kind of admission. They follow a trail that is not always easy to follow. Josey has been careful. He has been moving through country where it is possible to travel for days without being seen. But Terrell is persistent, and eventually the trail leads toward the Texas settlement where Josey and his group have been staying. The net is drawing closed. Josey can feel it, in the way that men who have been hunted for long enough develop a kind of extra sense for the shape of their situation. He knows Terrell is coming. He does not panic, and he does not run. He has been running long enough. News comes in the way that news travels in frontier communities. Through riders, through traders, through the quiet intelligence network of people who pay attention to who is moving through their territory and why. Captain Terrell and his men have been seen, not far away, moving in the direction of the settlement. Josey receives this information with the particular stillness of a man who has been waiting for something to arrive and is not surprised when it does. He speaks to Fletcher, who has been part of this story from the beginning, in a way that is almost like a closing of a circle. Fletcher is a complicated man. He has tried to do right by everyone through this whole long period. tried to find a path between his loyalty to the men he commanded and his obligation to the official world he now has to live in. He has been working with Terrell because the choice was made for him in ways he couldn't fully resist. But he has never entirely made peace with what Terrell represents and what happened in Missouri. When Josey and Fletcher speak, there is the quality of two men taking stock of a situation they have both been living in for too long. Fletcher knows what Josey is. He has always known. He also knows what Terrell is. Josey prepares, not frantically, not with any great ceremony, but in the same methodical way he does everything. Checking his weapons, thinking through the shape of what is coming, letting his mind move through the possibilities until he has a clear picture of what needs to happen. The final confrontation comes in the town itself, or rather, in the immediate territory around it, in the particular geography of a frontier settlement where buildings and alleys and open stretches all offer their own particular qualities to what is about to happen. Terrell arrives with his men. He is confident in the way that men with official authority and superior numbers tend to be confident, carrying the assurance that the machinery behind him will make the difference. Josey meets him. What follows has a quality different from all the other confrontations in the story. Those earlier ones, with bounty hunters and Comancheros and all the various men who came looking for what they thought would be an easy payday. Those had the feel of obstacles to be dealt with. This one feels like a destination. This one has been coming since the morning the farm burned. Terrell is not an easy man to face. He is dangerous, and he has lived through his own share of hard situations. He is not a coward, whatever else he is. The confrontation between them is brief and decisive in the way that these things are when both parties have been building towards them for a long time. Josey does not carry rage into it, not in any visible way. He carries something colder and more final, a settling of accounts that has been waiting years for the right moment. He moves through it with perfect clarity. Captain Terrell falls. It is not a moment that the film celebrates with noise or spectacle. Josey Wales has not been a man who celebrates the things he does. He does what needs doing, and then he is still again, standing in the quiet aftermath of the thing that has just happened, in the dust of the frontier town, with the sounds of the place settling back into themselves around him. Terrell is the last significant thread connecting Josey to the world of the war, to Missouri, to the burning farm, to the morning that changed everything. With Terrell gone, the original engine of the story, the wound that set Josey Wales in motion, has been addressed. Not healed, perhaps. A thing like that does not heal entirely. But addressed. Met. Completed. He stands in the aftermath, and the quality of the silence around him is different from other silences in the story. It has the particular texture of a long journey arriving at its end. The men who came with Terrell, seeing the outcome of the confrontation, do not press the issue. There is something about the way Josey Wales stands in the aftermath of these things that communicates very clearly that further conversation along those lines would be a serious mistake. Fletcher arrives at this point, and this is an important moment. Fletcher is, in some ways, the representative of the official world that has been pursuing Josey Wales. He has been working with the authorities, operating within the system that declared Josey an outlaw and put a price on its head. But Fletcher has also known Josey Wales for years, has ridden with him and fought beside him, and understands something about who that man is that the official papers and proclamations do not capture. There is a quiet conversation between them, a moment of two men who have been through a great deal, looking at each other across a distance that is mostly made up of choices and circumstances. Fletcher says something that changes the shape of what comes next, He tells Josey that the man they were looking for, the outlaw Josey Wales, is dead. He says it plainly and with a kind of deliberate finality, as if declaring it makes it so, which in the practical world of frontier justice, it actually might. It is a gift, an extraordinary one, coming from where it comes. It is Fletcher choosing at the last possible moment, the man over the machinery. It is him drawing a line under the official story and walking away. Josey takes this in. He does not express gratitude in any elaborate way, because he is Josey Wales, and elaborate expression is not in his repertoire. But he understands what Fletcher has done. He makes his choice. He is not going to keep running. The people of the Texas settlement have been watching all of this. They have watched Josey Wales come among them, reluctantly and cautiously. They have watched him deal with the threats that have been bearing down on their community. They have seen who he is. Not who the wanted posters say he is, but who he is in the actual texture of living and acting alongside other people. The local Texas Ranger who arrives after Terrell's fall asks the people of the settlement about what they know. He asks about Josey Wales, whether the man is here, whether anyone has seen him. The people of the settlement look at him, and they look at each other, and something passes between them, the kind of understanding that forms in communities that have been through things together. They say they have seen a man, but they don't know who he was. He was a stranger passing through. They describe someone who doesn't quite match the wanted description. Different build, different horse, different direction of travel. Their faces are calm, and their voices are steady. The ranger, who is not without perception, looks around the settlement at the calm faces looking back at him. He considers the situation. He thinks about what he knows, and what he suspects, and what he can prove, and what it would cost to press the issue against a whole community that has clearly made its decision. He tips his hat. He says something about hoping they have a peaceful future out here. He rides away. He knows. And he has made his choice, too. A quiet, practical choice that speaks to the particular kind of justice that operates on the frontier, which does not always perfectly match the justice that is written on official papers. The immediate crisis has passed. Josey Wales stands in the settlement he has come to know, surrounded by the people who have traveled with him. Lone Watty, who is cleaning his rifle with the particular attention of a man who has always found comfort in the maintenance of tools. Grandma Sarah, who is already organizing something, because Grandma Sarah is always organizing something. Laura Lee, who looks at Josey with an expression that has a warmth in it that he doesn't entirely know what to do with. Little Moonlight, quiet and steady as always. The dog, who has no interest in the complications of human affairs and simply wants to be wherever the people are. This is his people, Josey Wales realizes, in whatever way that realization comes to a man like him. Not as a sudden revelation, but as a quiet recognition of something that has been becoming true for a long time. He has a place. He has people. He has the particular kind of belonging that is made, not found. Constructed out of shared roads and shared danger, and the accumulated small choices to stay, to help, to remain present, when it would have been easier to keep riding. The ranch, or what will become a ranch, is there in the Texas landscape, in the big sky country, with the wide prairie spreading out in every direction, and the air clean and dry and smelling of cedar and good earth. There is work to do. There is always work to do in a place that is being built. And Josey Wales is, at his core, a man who knows how to work. The decision is not announced. It doesn't need to be. Josey Wales who has been in motion since the morning his farm burned, stops moving. He stops running. He puts his horse in the corral, the way you do when you're staying, and he begins doing the work of the place. The fence mending and the water carrying and the small repairs that any working property requires. There is a particular quality to the work of building something after a long time of surviving. For Josey, who has spent years in constant motion, always watching, always ready to leave, always carrying the alertness of a man who cannot afford to be surprised, the act of picking up a hammer and driving a nail into a fence post has the quality of an extraordinary luxury. It is work that assumes a future. It is work that says, I will be here tomorrow to use what I am building today. He works alongside the other men in the settlement, the ones who have been trying to make this place into something before Josey arrived. He is not a talkative partner in this work, but he is a good one. Steady, competent, aware of what needs doing next without having to be directed. The kind of worker who makes the work go better simply by being present and capable. The people around him see this and make no great ceremony of it either. Grandma Sarah perhaps nods slightly, in that way she has of acknowledging significant things without fussing over them. Lone Watty, who has been with Josey through the most dangerous stretches of the road, settles in alongside him with the ease of a man who has been looking for a good place to sit down for a while. The days begin to take on a shape that Josey recognizes from a long time ago. The shape of a life that has a place in it, and a rhythm, and people who will be there in the morning. He is not the same man he was in Missouri. Of course he isn't. The years and the roads have taken that man now and changed him completely, the way fire changes things, into something different from what it was before. The difference is not nothing. He carries what he has carried since Missouri and always will. But there is something here, something real and present and good, something that deserves the same kind of care and attention that he once gave to a small farm in the Missouri hills, back when the world was younger and simpler, and the worst thing he could imagine was a poor harvest. He begins to give it that care and attention, quietly, methodically, the way he does things. The official story, thanks to Fletcher, is that Josey Wales is dead. The man they were looking for no longer exists in any legal sense. The declaration has been made, the file, in whatever approximate way frontier justice maintains files, has been closed. The bounty hunters, who operate on the principle that a dead man cannot be brought in for the reward, have no further interest in the matter. They move on to other pursuits, other names on other wanted notices, other trails through other territories. They are professional in the way of their particular profession, and the profession has moved on. The soldiers who served under Terrell are dispersed or reassigned, pulled in the various directions that the end of the war and the beginning of Reconstruction have pulled so many men. Back east, into the growing cities, into the new institutions that are being built out of the rubble of the old conflict. The particular machinery of pursuit that has been focused on Josey Wales loses its direction, then loses its momentum, then stops. The landscape around the settlement settles into something that feels, for the first time in a long time, like genuine quiet. Not the tense, watching quiet of dangerous territory, but the deeper quiet of a place that has come through something and found its footing on the other side. The long horizon of the Texas prairie, visible in every direction, holds its usual distances. The sky above is the enormous, uncomplicated blue of an afternoon that has nothing particular to declare. The grass moves in the wind. No riders appear on the horizon, looking for anyone. This is perhaps the quietest thing in the whole story, and the hardest to see from the outside. Revenge was the engine. For all the years of riding and fighting and surviving, revenge was the thing underneath everything else. The need to face the men who destroyed his family, to look them in the eye, to hold them accountable in the only way that the world he lived in made available to him. It was Terrell, most specifically, but it was also a more general accounting, with the world that had allowed what happened on that Missouri farm to happen, with the casual cruelty of men who hold power and use it badly. That engine has been running for a very long time. Now, in the quiet of the Texas settlement, with the work of building something good taking up his hands and his attention, Josey begins to set it down. Not dramatically, not in a single defined moment. The way a man sets down a heavy thing he has been carrying too long. Gradually, without fanfare, piece by piece, until one day he reaches for it and realizes it isn't there anymore. He sits one evening on the porch of the ranch house, or whatever structure is serving as a ranch house in these early days, and watches the sun go down over the prairie. The sky turns amber and rose, and the long shadows of the grasses stretch across the ground, and somewhere nearby, Lone Warty is doing what Lone Warty does, and the dog is lying in a patch of warmth, and the day is settling into its peaceful ending. Josey watches all of this. The anger is still in him somewhere, because these things don't simply leave. But it is no longer in charge. Something else is in charge now. Something quieter and more patient. Something that looks at the evening and the company and the work that has been done and finds in it not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of release from the grip of the past. He was a farmer once, a simple man with land and family, and the quiet dignity of useful work. The road back to something like that has been very long and very dark, and has cost an enormous amount. But he is here now, in the evening light, in the good company of people who have chosen him and whom he has chosen, and the road behind him is behind him. It does not have to be the only road. The Texas landscape is, in its own way, one of the great characters of this story. It is a land of contradictions, vast and empty and full of life at the same time, harsh and beautiful in the same breath, demanding and generous depending on how you approach it. The settlers who have come here have come with all the ordinary human mixture of hope and fear and practicality, and the land takes all of that and turns it into something over time that is neither hope nor fear, but something more durable than either. The particular corner of Texas where Josey and his group have settled is the kind of country that rewards patience. It is not immediately giving. The soil requires work. The water requires digging for in certain seasons. The weather is unpredictable in ways that keep a farmer humble. But it is good land underneath all of that, the kind that a patient and capable man can work into something real. Josey has always been a patient man. He has always been capable. The settlement grows in the way that settlements grow when they are in the right place, with the right people. Slowly, steadily, one improvement at a time. Fence lines get extended. The corral is enlarged. Small gardens are planted in the good soil near the water source. There is the sound of hammering and the smell of fresh-cut wood, and children running in the spaces between buildings, and the low, comfortable sounds of animals that have enough to eat and enough water to drink. The days themselves have a different texture now than the days of riding and danger. They begin with the gradual light of the Texas dawn. That particular quality of morning out on the plains, where the sky brightens in stages from deep blue to pale gold to the full clear light of day, and the landscape seems to wake up slowly and with a kind of dignified unhurriedness. Breakfast is made and eaten while the air is still cool. The work of the day begins. Josey has always found something grounding in the specific physical tasks of working land and working with animals. There is a quality to that kind of work. Repetitive, immediate, satisfying in the way that things that require genuine skill and produce visible results are always satisfying. That quiets the mind in a way that nothing else quite does. When his hands are occupied in this way, the past does not demand attention. The present is sufficient. Lone Warty has found a particular pleasure in the quietness of the settled life. He is an old man who has spent too many years moving through hostile territory, and the chance to sit in one place and watch the days go by at their natural pace is one he takes with visible enjoyment. He can still make a perfectly dry, perfectly timed observation about anything that's happening around him, but he makes them from a chair in the shade now, rather than from horseback in dangerous territory. Grandma Sarah is in her element. A woman like Grandma Sarah is always more herself when there is something to organize and manage and improve, and a new frontier settlement offers essentially unlimited scope for that. She moves through the days with a purposeful energy that makes people feel both motivated and slightly tired, and she is the kind of force that quietly makes everything around her better than it would have been without her. Laura Lee is settling into the Texas life with a combination of adaptation and her own gentle character. She is finding what she is good at, what she enjoys, what she wants from this particular corner of the world. There are conversations in the evenings between her and Josey that have the careful, unhurried quality of two people who are feeling their way toward something without rushing it. Little moonlight moves through the settlement with the quiet attentiveness of someone who is watching to see if this place is what it appears to be. She has been disappointed before, and she is not in a hurry to extend trust further than it has been earned. But the days continue to offer what they offer. Decent treatment, work that has value, people who meet her eyes without calculating what she's worth to them in some transaction. And the watchfulness gradually softens into something that, while it is not quite ease, is at least comfort. She and Lone Warty have their conversations in the shade. Two people who have lived on the margins of the world that has been built around them, finding in each other's company a recognition that does not need to be explained. They share what they know. They share what they have seen. They find, perhaps, that having someone nearby who understands without requiring explanation is its own quiet and significant gift. The last image the story leaves us with is one of settlement in both senses of the word. Josey Wales, sitting in the quiet of the Texas evening, is a man who has come a very long way from Missouri. He carries Missouri with him. He always will. The wife and the son and the farm and the burning and all of it. That is part of him now, woven into who he is, the way that the worst things that happen to people become part of them. Not erased, but integrated, made into something that can be lived with. He is not the quiet Missouri farmer he was before the war. He cannot be. Too much has happened. Too much has been changed. Too much of the world has been seen and survived. That man was taken away before Josey fully understood what he had. But the man who is here, in the Texas evening, has something that the man who was running and fighting did not have. He has ground under his feet. He has people around him who are his, who he is part of, who he will still be with tomorrow. He has the work of building something, which is the only work that has ever really satisfied him. Not the work of destruction, however necessary it sometimes was, but the work of making something real and durable in the world. The sun finishes setting over the prairie. The stars come out one by one, and then all at once, filling the enormous Texas sky with their quiet and permanent light. The fire that someone has built crackles and shifts, throwing orange light across the faces of the people gathered around it. Lone Warty's weathered profile, Grandma Sarah's sharp and comfortable expression, the younger faces of Laura Lee and the others, the dog in the warmth. Josey Wales looks at all of this. He does not smile exactly. He is not a man who smiles often, and the road has not made him more demonstrative. But there is something in his face in this moment. Some easing, some settling, some very quiet arrival. That tells the whole story better than any words could. The fire has burned down to a comfortable bed of coals that gives a steady, warm light without the brightness of a new fire. The people around it are in various states of ease, some talking quietly, some simply sitting, some already drowsing in the warmth. The sounds of the night, Texas prairie, come in softly from the darkness beyond the firelight. The wind in the grasses, the distant call of a night bird, the occasional sound of one of the horses shifting in the corral. These are the sounds of a life, Josey thinks, or something like that thought passes through him without words, the way the most important recognitions often do. Not the absence of danger. There will always be some of that, out here, in this country, in this time. Not the absence of loss. What he lost in Missouri will never be recovered, and the weight of it is with him still, the way these things always are. But the presence of something worth being present for. He is home. Not the home he lost. That home is gone, and the world that held it is gone, and no amount of time or distance or new beginning can bring it back. And Josey Wales has made his peace with that fact in the only way that peace with such facts is ever made. Slowly, incompletely, at significant cost. But this place, this evening, these people, this fire, this long and quiet Texas night settling around everything like a blanket. This is something real. The days that follow have the quality of something beginning rather than something ending. The ranch takes shape, the garden gets planted, the corrals are mended, and the animals settled in. There is the companionable noise of a working household, voices calling across the yard, the clang of tools, the smell of cooking that drifts out across the warm morning air. Grandma Sarah moves through all of it like a small, determined force of nature, making sure things are done the way they ought to be done, and not hesitating to inform people when they are not. Lone Warty finds his place in the shade and becomes a kind of permanent fixture there. Someone who is always present, always observant, always ready with a perfectly timed, dry observation about whatever is happening. He and Little Moonlight have their own quiet understanding. Two people from nations that have been reduced by the same machinery, finding in each other's company a kind of recognition that needs no elaborate expression. Laura Lee is settling into the Texas life with a combination of adaptation and her own gentle character. She is finding what she is good at, what she enjoys, what she wants from this particular corner of the world. There are conversations in the evenings between her and Josey that have the careful, unhurried quality of two people who are feeling their way toward something without rushing it. He is not a man who knows how to rush anything, which is, in this particular circumstance, exactly the right quality. The Texas night stretches out in all directions, enormous and still and full of stars. Somewhere out there, the frontier continues to be the frontier, wild and complicated and full of the kinds of stories that happen to people who are living at the edge of the known world. But here, in this small and steady circle of firelight, with these particular people in it, there is peace. Josey Wales has earned it. every hard mile of it. And in the quiet of this evening, with the fire burning low and the stars overhead, and the whole long past lying behind him like a road he has finally come to the end of, he allows himself to simply be where he is. Still, present, home. Let that settle over you now. The wide Texas sky, the warm fire, the still prairie night. Let the story close gently around you, like a door at the end of a long day. You can rest now. The journey is done. The end, if you are still awake. Try our other movie story videos. Subscribe if you liked the video. Thanks.